First off, I do apologize for any wind noise. I do have a fan running. This is Louisiana, y'all. It's late August, but it's still extremely hot. So I apologize in advance for that. So one of the first things I'm normally gonna check is my air filter. I just had a race last weekend. It was super dusty. And as you can see here, we got some brown mixed in with that blue. So time to clean this guy. I'm also checking like around in here, see if the filter is kind of peeling away from the lip, or if the lip is peeling away from the air box, just to see if any dust or anything's getting through. Just doing a visual check, see if everything's good. And it's definitely gonna need a cleaning. I might honestly clean it and save it for later and get me a new Twin Air. I've heard those are really good at keeping all the dust and sand and grit out of the motor, and that's what I'm all about. So probably gonna order a few of those. Got one going on my 125 as well. I want to start that build series here soon, so stay tuned for that. Another thing I like to check is the spark plug. This is a 2-stroke, and even though I'm running Electron, I like to run it rich. I just like the way the throttle response is down low with this bike. Every bike's different. Everybody's preference is different. It's all about personal preference. Whatever makes you happy, but I do like to run mine a little on the rich side. So I like to check them fairly often just to make sure that they are good to go. And see, this one's looking a little wet. As I was saying, I like to run a little rich, but doesn't mean we can't clean it off and use it again. But that's always a good thing to check. 2-strokes are known to foul plugs, so it's always good to check your plugs. Make sure you hear it snap like that and you are good to go. Alright, so another thing I like to check is my sprockets. What I do is I like to look right in here. You can kind of tell. Let's see, make sure you guys can see. You can kind of tell these are starting to get a little worn. It's starting to look like a J. It's not equally spaced. It's not a perfect U. It's starting to get more worn on this side than that side, if you can tell. Always want to check and make sure that you got your dog-eared washer holding your sprocket nut on so it won't come loose. What you want to do, just visually check with my eyeballs right in here. Spin around, make sure I'm not missing any teeth. Then I want to do the same thing. What I normally do is find the numbers. See, I got a 52 tooth right there, which I'm actually going to change here soon. And change out the chain too. It's kind of worn, but it's getting me through. I need to change the front sprocket. It's honestly better to change all of your drivetrain out at the same time than to do it separately, because the chains get worn to each specific sprocket. So putting a new sprocket on this old chain would potentially wear both the new sprocket and the old chain quicker than they were wearing before. Just a little tidbit of information for y'all. So what I'll do is I'll find 52. I'll just look right in here, make sure I'm not missing any teeth or something crazy like that, until I come back around to the 52 again. So not missing any teeth, good to go. I also want to look at my chain condition, just the condition of my chain. As you can see here, we got some rust, so she's a little dry. So we're going to lube this thing up. I'm a big fan of the Motorex chain lube, off-road, fully synthetic, the good stuff. There's a lot of sand down here, and this doesn't get a bunch of sand stuck in it like some chain lubes do. So what I'll do is I'll find the master link, and I'll just go on top and just what you're shooting for is the space in between the links on each side. That's where all your action takes place. My chain's already rolling easier. As you can see, my master link's kind of tweaked, but it's still hanging on. It still moves, it's just a little stiff. And I'll just kind of give it a few revolutions just to kind of get everything set in, keep it from dripping as much. Honestly, it's good to just store your chain with lube on it. I hadn't really messed with my bike since the race last weekend. I cleaned it, I put a little bit of lube on it, but obviously not enough if a week later it's already looking rusty like this. So now that I got it lubed up, it'll be fine for like another week or so. Just keep your stuff lubed. Insert genitalia joke here. So another thing I like to do before I go on a ride is I like to check my brake pads, see if they've had any damage done or anything. I don't know if you guys can see up in there for real or not, but a good way to check is get it off the ground, spin it, and jab the brakes and see if it stops. You can also do it with the rear, just testing it out. Checking the rear brake pad visually just to make sure we got two pieces on each side. One piece didn't fly off or something crazy like that. You never know. Another thing I like to check is my fork canter, make sure my front axle is aligned properly. And the way you do this is go to your front right side pinch bolts, just loosen them a little bit. Don't go super crazy with it. Then you take your bike and cycle your forks. You can do that by running it into a tire or whatever you got. I'm gonna use my truck tire over here, and you grab your brake at the front, grab your front brake at the same time rather, and bam. See my forks actuate right there? Bam. Oh yeah. Boom. And that right there is enough to realign your front axle. I don't do this all the time. I don't really even know if it does a whole lot, to be completely honest with you. I've just heard that if you hit a tree or wreck or something, your forks can get all up in a bind, and that can cause them to not actuate properly. You want your forks to be nice and plush and supple and smooth. So I don't do that all the time, but every few rides or so I'll probably do it. And then you just get your wrench, tighten your pinch bolts back up, kind of go back and forth so the pressure is applied evenly, and you are good to go. Another thing I like to check before I go on a ride is my bolts, make sure they're tight. Not literally every single bolt. I know what you guys are thinking, like that would take way too much time. But if you ride a two-stroke, especially an older two-stroke like this one, this is a 2003 YZ250 with a 295 big bore kit in it, and it vibrates like all get out. So there's a few bolts on it that like to come loose, and I found this out the hard way over time. So one thing I like to do before I go on a ride is make sure those bolts are tight. Here's a few bolts that get loose on my bike. If you have any certain bolts that get loose on yours, drop those in the comments. So here's one right here, my shifter bolt. It likes to come loose down there, and as you can see, it's pretty rigid right now, so it doesn't really need anything. We'll just give it a little bit just to make sure. Oh, yep, just a little bit. It took a little bit. All right, so other bolts that I like to check. My bark busters. The first race I ever did, I ran into so many trees and dropped my bike so many times that the bark busters were like falling off. I literally had to stop at one point and go back and get my bark buster and stick it in my backpack. Ever since then, I've realized how important it is that your bark busters are tight, especially if you know you dropped your bike last time you rode it, whether you got wraparounds or flag style guards. They do tend to loosen up when you hit stuff. So another thing I like to check is air pressure, obviously. Most of the time I'll check it right before I leave the trailhead, but sometimes I'll do it beforehand. So another thing I like to check is my chain tension. I like to do 3 fingers behind the chain slide. And this is actually pretty good right now. If it wasn't, get down here, loosen up your lock bolt so you can move your chain tension bolt in and out and lock it down. There's actually a really nice tool that I like to use that makes it a whole lot easier. This little guy right here, what you do is you put it on the chain, screw it onto the sprocket, and you can just kind of look down the line, this little pole. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Just kind of see that it's a little bit to the right, but it's kind of hard to get it 100% straight. I probably need to adjust it a little. The straighter your chain, the less wear it'll have. I hope you all found the video today helpful. Here's a little sneak peek of next week's video. My best bud Taylor came down to visit for Labor Day weekend, and we made plans to travel down to New Orleans for the LACC race on Sunday. But as usual, our plans never seem to work out as planned. So stay tuned for some dirt shenanigans, crashes, carnage, and the usual two-wheeled thrills. Thanks for brapping with me today, y'all. Until next time. Oh my goodness. Dirt naps already. Oh man. Dude, my left hand, I literally like clutched it and let out, and my left hand just completely let go of the bar. Oh. Already. Hey, at least you don't have to be the first one to eat shit today.
It's okay, I almost ate back there before you did.
All right.
Like, oh, I made it, but he didn't.
Man, I was feeling it too.